Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 8 of IGEL Weekly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. It's just me and Seb today. Seb, how's it going?
Pretty fine. Thank you for asking. What about you?
It's good. It's good. Chris had the audacity to take a day off, Chris Feeney.
He
Have
deserved
to
it.
take a day off on a podcast recording day. So if Chris is listening at some point, we're making fun of you. Doug found something better to do, right? Doug's not joining us today. He's out probably walking around the streets of Berlin talking to strangers.
I would more say that he is trying to save some child from a burning house, but yeah.
Yeah, well, whatever. He's a hero, right? Doug Brown's our hero.
Right.
So, so look, you and I were just chit-chatting before we hit the record button, and it was very pleasing to me. Two things have happened today. One, I had one of the listeners, somebody commented on LinkedIn about one of the things we said during one of the podcasts. It was actually David Pro. So if David is listening, thanks for listening. David contacted me about something related, but not necessarily on the specific topic, but related. And, those types of moments, guys, when you tell us that you're listening and you're getting value out of what we're doing, which that's the other part. Seb said that, some of the IGEL community members mentioned that they are listening to our podcast and they were getting value out of it. And that's very fulfilling for me. And I'm sure for Seb and Chris and Doug as well. Yes. Do I do this because it's part of my business and I need to make money? Absolutely. Do I do this or this and the other 4 to now soon to be 6 total podcasts that we do? Do I do that because I just love it and this is my space and I've just somehow made a career out of something I enjoy doing? That's even more true. So any type of feedback you guys can give us, good, bad, or indifferent, we'll take it. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you guys in person at a conference down the road, whether it's Synergy, VMworld, Disrupt, Ignite, you name it, Nutanix.next. Hopefully we'll all get together at some point and we can, you guys can tell us what we need to do to make our podcast better. So Seb, I appreciate you joining today. Our topic today is very, very timely. Came out 5 days ago. It's a blog that Doug put on the community, and it is the IGEL OS RPI4. And I'll be interested in what that means. For NComputing RX420 IGEL step-by-step getting started guide that you worked on with Dougie to get out for the community as far as learning how to implement these new NComputing Raspberry Pi units, right?
Exactly. So we had a couple of thoughts, and if we have time at the end of the session, I will just try to sum up a little bit which kind of different product names we had for the solution, because Raspberry Pi is definitely one term we are using. But if we speak about ARM, if we speak about the RX420, the NComputing as a main vendor, etc., it makes a product sometimes quite complicated to identify. So if we have a couple of minutes at the end of the session, I would be happy to share a few insights regarding that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that would be good to kind of decrypt some of the naming stuff so that people can wrap their head around it. Was this a situation where the community was coming to you guys saying, hey, this is great, how do we get going, help us understand it better? Or was this something that you and Doug came up with as a value add to get ahead of it?
Honestly, it was a mix of both, I would say. We had a couple of people who were gentle enough to help us to develop the product itself. So we had a kind of beta tester group, and we saw quite early in that beta phase that a lot of people, and myself, was a bit surprised that the device just came with, let's say, a short guide coming from NComputing, which was absolutely great, no question. But regarding the IGEL OS implementation was a little bit, let's say, short. And we had a couple to cover a lot of questions in the chats and also via mail when it was a customer who was not on the IGEL community. And since that, thanks to Simon Cleffin and team, we then thought about creating a getting started guide, not only for the IGEL OS for ARM, but also the whole RX420 device itself. So from the unboxing, the size, the standard questions you may have. So covering all that frequently asked questions part. And that's where we hopefully covered everything that you need on that device. If you are feeling that we are missing something, just give us a shout on the Azure community and we would be happy to add that topic.
Yeah, that'd be great. And, the whole thing about IGEL, which I run into this all the time as a consultant and as a leader of a company that works with IGEL, in theory, if you keep it simple, it's pretty simple. At the same time, there are things to know. I'll tell you firsthand that I've got my Raspberry Pi right here, right? I plan on using this as my primary device, but I'm giving it about a month so that everybody else can find the bugs, everybody else can find any issues with it, and then I will roll it out and use it as my primary device and see how it goes. I'm the guy that when a new year model of a car comes out, I almost never buy that car because I want 12 to 24 months of somebody else finding out what needed to be redesigned a little bit and tweaked before I go out and spend my money and have to deal with whatever it is.
Even if I'm working for the vendor who are providing that device, I fully understand your point, and I would do the same on a car, definitely.
Yeah, Seb, here's the thing, right? And here's what a lot of people don't get. I know people that aren't working in technology don't get this all the time. This is just a piece of hardware. It's the software that goes on it that makes it special. And you know who created the software that goes on it is human beings. And human beings make mistakes. And all those ones and zeros. I mean, look, my people in my life will complain about the internet or something being slow or an application not working. I'm like, do you know how many millions of lines of code went into making that thing work at all? How many ones and zeros are processing? How much data is going across the network? If you just stop it. So here's the thing. Last night we took a smart plug for our outdoor lights at our house, and we hooked it up to an app on my wife's phone. We hooked it up to our Alexa. Hopefully a lot of Alexas aren't going off right now, but we hooked it up to an Alexa. And the fact that even worked, like so simple, it took 5 minutes or so for that to work. And when we got done, I was like, that's absolutely amazing. There's a lot of technology that went into making me able to say, turn lights on, turn lights off. We live in a very amazing time and we're very fortunate to live. But my point is, it takes a lot of human beings, a lot of years to come up with code and frameworks and reusable programs and things to be able to make something as simple as me turning my lights on and off with some type of voice activated command. Seb, I don't know how old you are. I'm 47 years old. When I was a kid, we just dreamed of this kind of stuff. And now you order it on Amazon, it comes 24 hours later and you actually have it in under 24 hours. That's pretty freaking awesome.
I remember the time where I had this I don't know if the term in English is the same, but a clapping switch, where you clap in your hands and the lights go on or go off. So the thing that I went in a do-it-yourself kit, and that's the way how I could, let's say, turn off or turn on the light. So that means I'm getting old too, because now you are all doing that through your phone, through your home automation. So yeah, it's pretty important.
So the lights that I put up, 8:00 Sunday night, my wife decides she wants outdoor lights in our screened-in porch. That's a whole nother topic. But anyway, we put those up and it's way up high where only I can reach it. I'm 6'4", long, skinny arms, I can reach it. But the rest of the family can't reach it. They were going to have to get out of the stool. I'm like, we're not doing that. And my wife's exact words were, well, why don't we get a clapper?
Nice.
And I thought about it for a second. I was like, that's a good idea. And I was like, hold on. It's 2021. Surely do something better than a clapper. And I know there's smart plugs. I just have never owned one personally. It literally took me 30 seconds on Amazon, hit order, 24 hours later, it's at my house, implemented. That's pretty awesome. And we're just talking about all this because, that's a great example of these things, right? The Raspberry Pis, the idea that you can ship them to employees all over the world. They plug them up, turn them on, hit a button, they phone home, and they're up and working. That's the promise of the IGEL operating system and very efficient, cost-effective devices like this Raspberry Pi I have in my hand.
Yeah, exactly. And powerful enough to run a couple of use cases. So,
sure,
yeah, I agree.
Sure. Yeah, I can't wait to make it my primary machine. So one, that I can find out the beautiful things you can do with it, and I can also find out the limitations, right? Because I'm currently running a thin OS on my computer here where we're doing the podcast. It's got 16 gigs of memory. It's got a quad core processor, maybe more than quad core processor. I'm going to replace it with a Raspberry Pi in like 3 weeks. That's going to be an interesting little test to see how it goes.
Besides the fact that we are selling now the solution, I'm a big fan of that kind of devices in the private world too. So having some, let's say, home automation stuff, or also your private server, some power consumption monitoring tools. All that stuff is created for the ARM platform. And I must say that that's where the NComputing solution, or the Raspberry Pi Foundation, did a marvelous job. Everything which is related to that solution is, not everything, but a lot of stuff is community-based. So if the community wouldn't be such big for the Raspberry Pi, we wouldn't maybe see the product coming up so quite fast instead of next years. And that's where a lot of other ARM platform we already had on our portfolio, or we evaluated, went a little bit off the road because the support, the different solution ideas and development wasn't such big like on the Raspberry Pi Foundation ones.
Yeah. It's crowd, it's sourced through the community. It's the laws of supply and demand, right? We need something smaller, more efficient, but functional. It's economics at its core. It's awesome. All right, so let's talk about this guide here. I'll just, I assume you have it up in front of you. Let me ask you this, Seb. What's your number 1, 2, and 3 reasons why IGEL is now on the Raspberry Pi? Because when I first started working with IGEL, I was like, no, we don't need that. Underpowered, never get it done. What from your perspective, what are the top 3 reasons why IGEL has moved its operating system, not moved, but is included now the Raspberry Pi, the ARM-based devices in its portfolio?
Honestly, the first answer would be, from my opinion, is customer driven. Customer asked for the Raspberry Pi integration for years now, at least from the Raspberry Pi 3, I guess. That was the first time where we really got pressure from the market. Hey, why are you not using that kind of platform for delivering the IGEL OS? So the first answer for mine is customer driven, market driven. The second one is, since the Raspberry Pi 4 came out with dual screen, and that's where I guess we waited for, I mean, not only we, but the whole market, and the 4K support came out. That was the second reason why we saw that the technical specifications of the device are now, let's say, more fitting in a professional use case of the Raspberry Pi, because before that it was a great device for a simple use case, but usually not for a workplace where you have a user sitting in front of it, more kind of monitoring solution. And the third one is just maybe to break some bad experience we had, because some of our listeners are maybe remembering that time we had already a product with ARM that we launched a couple of years ago. I think it was seven or 8 years ago, something like that. We already had the first contact to the ARM platform in general. That wasn't such successful. So maybe some breaking also a ban that we had with the ARM platform, and hopefully get now better success with it. So that would be my first thoughts.
Yeah. Any other reasons why you think IGEL decided to go the Raspberry Pi route after years of saying no, other than the community and the demand?
I guess also the support from Citrix now, right? So we have this all. I mean, even if the solution is not integrated fully at the moment, but it's still in the, let's say, testing phase, everything related to the workspace hub and also the hardware support, the unified communication support, which isn't there completely, but is getting better and better. And hopefully we will get support for all the standard VDI plugins in the near future. That's where we waited for. And since we are now seeing that it might come or it will come, it simplifies our work a lot to get a solution ready to market.
Right. Yeah, it's an ecosystem thing, right? A great piece of Raspberry Pi hardware, or maybe a great operating system without the app that's necessary, or makes it viable. What do you got? And now Citrix has made their application for the ARM-based solutions on par with the rest or close. And that makes it more useful for a simple use case, even though, as you and I just discussed, it's really not that simple under the covers, but IGEL and others work hard to make it simple.
Exactly.
All right, so let's run through the first section of what's in the blog here, and that's the introduction, which is an overview, the hardware details. Bullet number 3, which I love, is known limitations, right? I mean, this isn't the end-all be-all solution. If you want the end-all be-all solution from IGEL, get the operating system, put it on a powerful PC, get the operating system on an UD7. If you want that, it costs money. The Raspberry Pi is not the end-all be-all. but it is a good solution for simple use cases. The unboxing experience, right? I mean, that's Apple made that famous. They're great at unboxing stuff. I watched the Steve Jobs podcast, documentary the other day, and for all the things he wasn't, there's lots of things he was, like a great marketer and a great packaging guy, right? The package has to look beautiful. That's your first experience. Which, by the way, this does look good. I'm impressed with the way it is packaged. IGEL software suite getting started guide. There's a whole lot of IGEL that's got to go into it potentially, or you can keep it very simple. But if you want to do it the enterprise way, if you want to scale it down the road, it's best to have the IGEL solution in place before you go too far down this road. And then the first boot. Anything about the intro that we need to kind of highlight while we're going through the concept of the getting started guide?
Yes, I would definitely, let's say, share a few insights about a few, I will not call it limitations, but more a few tips and tricks I would go through. And we tried to mark it down in the document, just maybe going a step backward to why did we create that and in which context. So kudos goes to Douglas Brown, who created all this Duggish text. So everything which is really written down and explained is the last byte. I was honored to make the screenshots, the general procedure to see if everything that I made there was quite readable for someone who will take, let's say, the IGEL OS for the first time and boot it up for the first time, maybe also in his company, without having the universal management suite in place. And that's where we started. So if I would just share a few thoughts regarding the Raspberry Pi, we tried to cover in the document, I would not say every use case because it's difficult, but we tried to cover every expectation that you might have as a customer, as a user. Because we have users who are already using IGEL for years, for decades maybe, and then we have people who heard for the first time maybe from IGEL and thought, okay, I just waited for an ARM implementation to get this project started, to use, let's call it a thin client instead of a full-blown PC. And that's the first time you have the RX420 device from NComputing in front of you, you boot it up, and now you are lost, I guess. And that's where we tried to cover the local procedure, how to configure the device, and on the other hand, how to configure the device by using the Universal Management Suite, also known as UMS. So that's where I just wanted to set the expectation. We are covering both, even if our focus is definitely the UMS part, which is profile-based. And on that note, we also covered the important information that we gathered through the community feedback that we received, but also from the feedback that we received from our internal team, so all the business development and Sam and Cleffen team in that case. So we went through all that and just wanted to share a few things that are important in my opinion, because a Raspberry Pi 4 isn't a full-blown x86 device like a UD2 or UD3. We're speaking about a different architecture. That means that we have a couple of limitations. If we compare a thin client from IGEL, UD2, UD3, or maybe a full-blown PC to a Raspberry Pi. I mean, it might feel obvious, but sometimes it explains why something happened like we did in the IGEL OS integration. So like an example, we don't have a CMOS battery on the main board of the Raspberry Pi. So we cannot save stuff over a reboot like you would do in a BIOS. So and that's quite important because everything which is related to certificates, to verifications, to security checks are mostly based on a specific time and on a time check. So if you don't have an NTP server set in your local configuration or on your UMS through a profile, you might have some strange behaviors. And that's just to give you a short idea. That's the kind of stuff we tried to cover in the guide, not only clicking around in a wizard, but also giving you the insight, why did we did that? And everything that we have in IGEL OS for x86 may not be there on the ARM integration we have at the moment. And just to be clear, it isn't because we didn't want it to integrate them, because sometimes there is just no integration for the ARM platform in general, or for the Raspberry Pi platform to be more precise. So just to share that, that's the reason why we have a couple of client components who are not included by default in the RPI4 integration.
Hey, Seb, I want to pause for a minute. I want to tell you a little bit more about my story last night. I was just noticing that the NComputing device comes with a QR code. You see that?
Yeah.
Last night, my daughter had pulled out the little manual guide on how to set up the little smart plug. And I was like, honey, there's a QR code on it. Maybe it's like the menu at the restaurant where you just scan a QR code and the menu comes up. And so we did it. And it was awesome because it took us straight to a video that walked us through the setup. Just a quick thing for IGEL and NComputing here, but what if you put a QR code on this guy that took you through basically the setup guide, but in the form of video, and maybe you and other members of the community work to do that? That would be awesome, I think. And you could go through the idea, okay, UMS, here's a video on how to set up UMS. If you want to just do it manually through the local setup, which is one thing I love about IGEL is the UMS profiles and the local profiles are identical, right? That's maybe there's something different, but for the most part, they're identical. So I tell people all the time when I set one up locally, I'm like, hey, the UMS will be exactly the same way once we get it in place. So it kind of just transitions across. But the idea that maybe a QR code could go on these things that would maybe walk you through a video that's similar to the setup guide, or at least take you to the setup guide.
Good, Eddie. Good point. Yeah, like it. We'll take on the list. It's really good.
All right. Next section in here says device registration, and that's registration with the UMS, which, I think I'm kind of catching the idea here. You guys are not only using this as an opportunity to educate people on the NComputing device, but you're also using it as an opportunity to educate people on UMS, which, let's be honest, that's a big part of the secret sauce to IGEL is the scalability and power of the UMS.
Absolutely right. And that's where you don't have to think about which kind of devices you are looking at. I mean, in the past, if you think about the OS 10 integration, we had a difference between our own hardware and third-party hardware. That's not the case anymore in the IGEL OS 11, and we make it, let's say, even more easier now that we just have one firmware for more or less every kind of device. If it is an IGEL one, it's a third-party one, or if it, in that case, the RX420, which is not properly spoken IGEL device anymore. And that's where we make it quite easy now to have just one set of profile which covers more or less everything. And if you think about all the stuff that you have to install to configure locally, you can do that definitely on one device, maybe on two, but at least if you start at the third one, even if I as an IGEL employee would every time recommend to use a UMS, even if for one device, but I would say at least at the second, just think about creating profiles, because profiles are just, like you already covered it perfectly, and is just a replication of the local configurations that you can do on one device, but the same on the UMS that you can deploy then on 1,000, on 10,000 devices at one time without having the need to configure something locally. And that's where this registration process is quite important. I know it sounds weird, but I still have a couple of customers. It's not a huge amount of them, definitely not, but I have a couple one here in Germany who are not even knowing that devices can be registered automatically into UMS, into the Universal Management Suite, gets a configuration automatically deployed by using the default directory rules. Yep. So just in case, that's just common sense for us, but that's also the approach we try to cover in the Getting Started guide. A lot of things for us as an IGEL employee or IGEL users are, let's say, common sense, but not if you are booting up the device for the first time and you never had to get in touch with IGEL.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what I now know, which is probably very limited compared to what you know, these are all things that are easy for us, right? Of course you would do it that way. Of course you'd have it auto come up and figure out where the phone home to UMS, or at the very least do a network discovery and pull it into the UMS. But yeah, I meet people all the time that I see them just banging away on the keyboard managing their IGEL unit during a POC. I'm like, you don't have to do it that way, right? And it's easy for us because we've been through that learning curve. But hopefully the podcast and the Getting Started guide will help people realize that there is a curve to know about, and once you get around that curve or get over that curve, your life will be much better in the long run.
That's the reason why.
Yeah. I don't know if you cover it in here. I don't know that you do. But you guys are working, and maybe this is the first step at it, where instead of having to manage the firmware within the UMS, and the things that it takes to, phone home to the UMS and pull that down, you guys are starting to manage that from an internet-based system. And is the Raspberry Pi the first foray into that world?
Yes, definitely. I mean, using the ICG, so the IGEL Cloud Gateway, which creates a connection for devices that are outside of your company network, even if you are speaking about VPN, which is not needed for the configuration for the device anymore, that's definitely a huge step regarding the ARM platform. That also a step that we covered in the Getting Started guide, by the way, right? So if we think about the configuration of the endpoint, yes, definitely. If you put a RX420 into the network, it will get registered automatically in your UMS, in your company network, etc. But think about sending out a Raspberry Pi RX420 to an end user in his home office. He will not have a company network, obviously. So that's where the first one with that, which is started locally as soon as the device boots up, not only this device, but all devices that run IGEL OS, even a UD Pocket. And inside of this first run wizard that we as a technicians are mostly canceling quite soon because we are all doing that remotely, the end user can enroll the device itself from the endpoint. So he can just put an ICG address, push enter a multiple time password, and get registered. Or in a soon future, hopefully, just using an Active Directory account, but that's maybe just a feature that we can share that we might integrate in the near future that is not directly related to the RX420 integration.
Okay. All right, well, the next section here that's called out in the kind of table of contents, if you will, that's in the blog, profiles and licensing. It talks about basic configuration, how to configure NTP, which, if you work in technology, you have to know by now that you really need an NTP server on everything you touch. If you don't, it'll mess you up in the long run. I will tell you that recently I had an issue where I was running VMware Workstation on my my laptop, and I paused the virtual machines, which were actually hosted VMware ESX machines, and then I unpaused them like 15 minutes later. Totally screwed up the time, and right in front of like 20 customers, I had this massive demo issue, and all it was I needed a reboot because the time was off now by 15 minutes. What a disaster. It was horrible. And it was the little basic things, but time matters, right? Time's really important. For example, Y2K was all about date, right? I mean, just the date, right? The date's got to be right, or between the hardware and the system, or we're all screwed up. And the other systems you're talking to, right? Active Directory is like 5 minutes, or if you're off by 5, we're not going to talk to you, kind of thing. Shadowing, which a big part of the IGEL story is, yes, you can shadow within your Citrix session, but even better that you can shadow the entire device, the endpoint device, so you see the holistic view of what the user's dealing with. And then licensing. Anything about the profile and licensing section you want to call out and talk about in more detail?
I would just get up the shadowing topic again, because it might sound quite, let's say, usual that you have a remote support for an endpoint. That's right. And in your company network, I wouldn't say something else. It's quite usual. You can install whatever you want. It works. On an endpoint, which is located in a teleworker situation or somewhere outside of your company network, you would have to ask the end user to download something, to install something like TeamViewer or whatever. In that case, you don't have to think about that anymore, since if you're using the ICG, so the IGEL Cloud Gateway, the shadowing function is already there before even starting a company network connectivity like a VPN. So if the user has an issue by connecting to your Netscaler, to your VPN, usually you cannot help him or her without having to tell her where to click and to get let's say a picture of the issue. There you can shadow the device even before the issue happened, and that's definitely helpful. On the licensing, yes. Honestly, the licensing topic and the licensing in general isn't such easy on our side. I must admit that we tried to cover the licensing as best as we could, but it's just the peak of the iceberg. We have so much different ways to deploy a license, or let's say even before deploying the license, ordering a license at your reseller, getting the delivery token, registering to the activation portal where you have your license balance. From there, decide how the licensing portal will communicate to the UMS on the better terms, the UMS with the licensing portal? Do you want to do that? If yes, through a proxy or not? If you don't want to do that, do you want to do it in offline mode, etc., etc.? So that's the expectation. I don't want to spread. We are not covering all that stuff in the Getting Started guide, because the licensing topic might be a separate documentation in the near future. We're already speaking about that with Doug. So we might have a separate documentation just for licensing. So what we did there is we did the offline licensing. So you take your MAC address, you put it into the license portal, you download a lick file, you import the lick file into the UMS, and the device, if you're lucky enough, gets it automatically, or if not, just push the settings UMS to device, and then the device gets the license. But that's what we covered. We not covered the all automatic license deployment stuff like UMS licensing ID, ALD token, because that's, I don't want to tease too much, but it will come, I guess, in the next months.
Yeah, we should probably do an episode on IGEL licensing and try to cover that the best we can.
Oh.
I think that was a no.
No. We will. It's like I said, it's really a tough topic, and I know that if we speak to an end user, that's definitely a topic where we can do stuff, let's say, better and more user friendly.
Well, look, it can't be as bad as Microsoft licensing, okay?
Touché.
You guys on the podcast can't see this, but I said that right as Seb was taking a drink. I thought he was going to spit it out. All right. The next topic, the next section is IGEL OS sessions, adding sessions to IGEL, to the Raspberry Pi device, how to create a Chromium session. The fact that Chromium is built into the operating system now is so awesome. That's going to be the reason why I can use it as my primary device in most cases, because I use a lot of SaaS apps. How to create a Chromium kiosk session, how to create a Chromium Citrix access, which let's just reiterate that a big part of the Raspberry Pi story for IGEL today is getting into either using Chrome or getting into Citrix. How to create a storefront session, how to create a self-service session, which would be kind of the differences between maybe going through the web portal and the workspace app, which Seb can clarify here in a second. Yep. How to turn on native USB direction and enable HDX webcam. Everybody's got to have their webcam working these days. Those are really hot topics. So Seb, there's a lot in that section. I know you can't cover it all here, but anything specifically in the IGEL OS sessions section of the Getting Started guide you want to highlight?
Yes, definitely. At least 3 to 4 different topics I want to speak about. First of all, never forget that if you get a device and like the RX420, you boot it up, you might get a so-called starter license. The starter license enables you to configure your device like you would do if you would have a valid license. So you can have a session created like Chromium, like Citrix, stuff that you wouldn't have if you don't have a license. So we wanted to make it easier to our end user or new users to have a better user experience with the endpoint. But at the same time, and I cannot repeat it enough, the starter license doesn't include a multimedia codec pack license, which means that if you have any kind of moving pictures inside of your Citrix session, multimedia redirection, whatever, scrolling inside a website, whatever you need, the multimedia codec pack is definitely the way to go. If you don't have that one, you might have a less good user experience that you would have with, and it might just, let's say, it might interfere and give you not so fluent user experience like you would do with. So if you have the feeling that something is slow or is not working like expected regarding, I don't know, YouTube or whatever, please check if you have a valid Workspace Edition license. If you have a valid Workspace Edition, everything is fine. You have definitely a multimedia codec pack license automatically with that license. On a starter license, you don't have it. So just in case, I want to sum up that one because it's really important to have the multimedia codec pack installed with your Workspace Edition. You don't have to do something, just keep Workspace Edition or ask your IGEL sales rep for a valid test license or go to IGEL.com and register for it.
Well, and I'm assuming just like with all the 11 or later licenses, there's a real easy way to get a free trial license during the setup piece, right? So if you're listening to this, don't be intimidated. There's a super easy way to get this done, much, much easier than it used to be. Jeff Kalberg and I used to go round and round about licensing because you had to know a lot before you could get the thing licensed. Now it's very simple, just a simple request of a license during the setup process. That makes it super easy. Okay, what else in this section do you want to highlight?
The native USB redirection, and the HDX webcam integration. Why did we cover that, and why I'm putting it in front of the other sessions? The reason is quite easy. The person who are testing an RX420 device will have the situation where he or she wants to test Teams or any kind of unified communication solution. At the moment, we are still working together with all the vendors to get them integrated as soon as possible into the solution itself. But at the moment, we are still, and that's not a, let's say, an IGEL topic, but more Citrix and unified communication topic, wanting and waiting for this vendor. So in the meantime, if you want to use a webcam inside of your Citrix session, the easiest way or the easiest workaround would be the better term, I guess, is to use the HDX webcam redirection, which doesn't mean that you have to redirect the webcam using the native USB redirection, not at all in that case, but using the webcam redirection virtual channel, which is covered by the guide. So that's a topic I just wanted to point out. If you want to use Teams, etc., you will have a good experience, definitely, but it's not the full-blown VDI plugin optimization that you have at the moment on x86 architectures, but it will come quite soon, I expect.
So Seb, there's always been this confusion in the world of Citrix that I try to address all the time. There's USB pass-through, where you're just passing through the code, the USB protocol, and then there's redirection of things that are happening on the endpoint that get magically go through the Citrix ICA channels and show up and work. In this case, we're talking about using the ICA channels, or are we talking about passing through the true USB protocol?
I'm speaking about the virtual channel. A native USB redirection in my case would be to redirect a local device, unplug it from the endpoint, and plug it in, let's say, virtually into the VDI terminal server, which might have some specific use cases, but in my case, I'm always trying to keep it off during my testings because it might interfere by grabbing my headset, my webcam, whatever device I connected through USB, and tries to redirect into the session, which at least will break any kind of optimization that you might have locally because the device is not there anymore. It's just on your terminal server. It will work, but it will definitely not work as smooth as it will work if you use it locally by using an optimized channel like the HDX webcam redirection.
Yeah, and you guys have that little test tool, right, where you can test your webcam using the basic local OS before you connect to Citrix. You make sure that's working, then you connect to Citrix, and there's a chance it'll work, right?
Exactly. Just in case, I must admit, I'm just booting up my UMS during that, so give me a few minutes. But I'm not sure if the webcam test tool is already there on the Raspberry Pi. So I will just have a look and come back to that in a few seconds, because I guess the UVC wasn't included at the moment where I had the last look on the device. So let me double check and I will do that. But on the x86, absolutely right, there is the webcam information tool, webcam info.
Yeah, and just let the record note that I just stumped Seb, so I get credit for that. No, I'm just kidding. I found something you didn't know. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't know if that translates into your English or not.
Perfect.
I found something you didn't know the answer to. But the good thing is he's literally booting up his UMS to go figure it out. So that's pretty awesome.
I'm on the way. The other thing I wanted to share, I guess that was upon number 3 from the 4 I mentioned, is a certificate retrievement. I mean, it sounds quite easy to get your certificate authority and put into the UMS, deploy to the endpoint. But even if I'm saying it this way, it isn't such easy to understand. So just remember that as soon as you start an application like the Citrix Workspace app or the Chromium to access your Citrix environment, and there, I'm not skilled to be a Citrix trainer, but just sharing some insight from the endpoint point of view, we need to verify certificates. And for verification, we need to import that certificate authority to the endpoint, so to the IGEL OS. That one can be done quite easily by using the UMS. We have a specific function which is called files, and through files, you can upload a specific file into the UMS, and you can then deploy that file to a couple of devices. That file can be, I don't know, a specific background, picture, whatever. But in that case, we're speaking about a certificate, and the certificate has to match the base64 format. So that's really important. So if you edit your certificate file, CRT or PEM file, it has to start with begin certificate. And at the end of the file, it must say end certificate. If you get something else like hieroglyphs or wingdings, something like that, it's definitely the wrong format, and the device will not be able to read that certificate file. So that's really important to understand.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. And files and certificates are often things that you get stumped on pretty early, especially in environments where you're using a less than trusted, maybe a self-signed cert or a cert from a lesser well-known certificate authority, right?
Absolutely right.
Yeah. All right. Well, that gets us down to the appendix section, which is normally the boring part. However, your first bullet says unsupported feature list, and that is very interesting. So what is that, and what does it cover?
I tried to get, by the way, the webcam information is there now. So it was integrated in the last update from IGEL OS on Raspberry Pi. So just in case, the webcam information tool is there even on Raspberry Pi. Coming back to your question, we have had the discussion which kind of features are integrated into x86 IGEL OS and which don't are available on the ARM platform. Mm-hmm. I tried to cover all of them. So I can just share how I did it. I created a profile based on 1105 x86. I created a profile on 110 for ARM, activated all settings, and then used the compare profile settings. That's a feature that's inside of the Universal Management Suite. Right-click on a profile, compare it with a second, and then you have the differences of the same settings that you made between them. And that's where you see that a couple of integrations are not there on the ARM, on the Raspberry Pi 4, so RPI4 integration we have. I already mentioned at the beginning, it's not because we didn't want to integrate them or just because we didn't have enough space or enough time. So in that case, it's mostly related to the fact that we don't have an, let's say, ARM version of that integration. It can be a library for a smart card. It can be a specific tool like, I don't know, the WVD client, which is not there on ARM at the moment, or going through other features like, I must remember which one it was. We had also a feature, I have to double check, which wasn't there. Some printing cups driver wasn't there too. So that's how we tried to separate and to give you a better overview about what you can expect on the Raspberry Pi 4 integration and which aren't there at the moment we are speaking.
Okay. And Seb, I mean, I think we've kind of hit on this. The Raspberry Pi at the moment, and maybe forever, is a very specific use case, right? Using Chromium, using the Citrix Workspace app. Is there a day coming where IGEL makes it on par with all the other devices, or is the limitations of it just something that we're just going to have a subset?
It's hard to say at the moment. I mean, I would lie if I would promise something at the moment, but I would say that as soon as an ARM integration is there, we will definitely have an eye on it and integrate it as soon as possible. I know that we are working quite close with VMware Horizon View, like an example, or with WVD, but at the moment it's pretty tough to say if you have a time frame for the different solutions. But the main focus, that's what I can say at the moment, the main focus is getting all that unified communication up and running, get the product as stable as possible. I mean, even if it's already stable at the moment, but even more stable, and integrate the next level of subset of features. And I would say this next subset might be related to some session client version that we might integrate in the near future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I
mean, you said you are a fan of Chrome. I'm more a fan of Firefox, so I can't wait to see a Firefox integration, but that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah. Well, I've got apps. I got SaaS apps I work with that either that only work with Chrome, some version of Chrome, or they're only supported with some version of Chrome. That same comment could have been made, I don't know, 10 years ago for just being Mozilla, but these days Google has the world in its hand. Whether it ever closes it and crushes it's a whole other question, but they have the world in their hands. So. Well, Seb, that was great. I appreciate you walking through that. I appreciate Doug's efforts on getting that user friendly and acceptable. But I think you had a lot to do with the content. It sounds like, obviously, based on the way you were able to walk us through that. Anything else about the guide before we adjourn from this podcast that you'd want users to know?
Yes, one last thing I didn't mention more than that at the beginning. We are now focusing on the RX420 guide, but never forget that we have a couple of other guides that are already available at the moment. How to set up your UMS, how to get an ICG up and running, so the IGEL Cloud Gateway, how to make the firmware customization looks good on your endpoint, how to update the firmware. All of that getting started guides are already there. And we are expecting a few new in the near future. And last thing I wanted to share, I didn't forget it. We have an internal joke regarding our product name. So we are not allowed to use some specific terms. And even if you speak about ARM in upper letters, in minuscule letters, in Raspberry Pi 4 or Raspberry every term you're using there is related to a legal article. So we have to be extremely careful in how we call the device in our solution. The short is RPI4, IGEL OS RPI4, and then we are good. Or if we would do it even smaller, it's RX420, and then we are good. But everything for ARM or whatever is not permitted.
Okay. So the user-friendly name of the OS is OS RPI4. The hardware that comes with the operating system, which you think IGEL, you think software-defined, two separate things, hardware, software. In this case, we're actually going back to the days of combining the two because they really are kind of integrated. That would be the RX420, which would come with the OS RPI4 operating system, right?
Exactly.
Now, you mentioned something a while ago. We'll call it out for the more techie folks on the call here. What's the current version what's the version number for the current operating system? Because it doesn't totally align with the other operating systems, right?
That's right for the moment. And that's maybe a good last topic from my side. At the beginning of the Getting Started guide, we covered how the device boots up and how it should look like. If you get another picture during the boot splash than what we did in the guide, then we might have two issues. First, you have an older image on the SD card, which isn't good because it's really an early version of the firmware. And the second one is you might also have receive a device which is not with IGEL OS. So that's just a short hint from my side. Coming back to your question, the actual version is, from what I recall, the 11.01.110. So 110 at the end. Okay. No RC, no release candidate, no beta in the name anymore. That's really the last version you can get.
But at some point, we expect those version numbers to be the same as the core OS, and once we're all at a stable where we're like for like, right, in terms of the number.
That's my expectation too, right?
Yeah. And do you guys cover in the guide what to do if you boot it up and it's an older version? Do you cover what to do, or is that different?
Yes, we covered it. We asked to ask the local IGEL sales rep, if I remember right, because that's really, since we are not allowed to open the device itself, which is obvious for a warranty reason, you cannot re-image the device. So you have to ask NComputing to do that. We might have a better way in the near future, but at the moment you are not allowed, obviously, to reflash the device like you would do on a UD Pocket or an IGEL device or a third-party hardware with the OSC. So the OS creator isn't available at the moment for that kind of integration.
Okay. Well, I'll just tell my IGEL sales engineer to come see me when I'm ready to open this thing up, because I know it's going to be out of date. And I'll let him do the work, do the magic. Well, Seb, thanks. This has been great. Tell Doug thanks for working on this. I really appreciate you guys doing this. It's a great example of the IGEL community. I will tell this group and yourself that, I saw online, I saw some debates going on about the Citrix community, which used to be, the prototype for how to build a technology community. And I think the ways they've they did in the past has kind of gotten a little antiquated. And I pointed them to you guys. I think you're doing a great job of using modern day tools. The fact that the world's a lot smaller these days, and you don't have, Europe and the U.S. that have to compete with each other. We can all collaborate together. And so just a quick moment to say thank you and highlight that you guys are doing a great job.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
And I said Europe and the U.S. I didn't mean to leave out the other continents. So there's lots of people in the IGEL community, and we welcome the collaboration from everybody. Even
people which comes from the UK are accepted too.
Oh, you had to throw that in there, didn't you? Well, I've never been to Europe. I want to go. I want to go soon. I want to go to Germany. The different cultures in such a small area. There was something on the other day. I was watching a documentary on Netflix or something, and they made the comment of 500 miles between Berlin and something in the UK. I was like, 500 miles? That's nothing, right? I mean,
that's right.
In the U.S., when you drive across Texas, that's that far. I'm relatively speaking, right? It takes 12 hours to drive from one end of Texas to the other. The idea you have so much culture and so many people in such an area, it's pretty amazing. You guys get along as well as you do.
And different languages, which makes it quite complicated sometimes. But yeah, different languages too. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, just you guys can all speak American. We'll be fine.
We try at least.
Yeah. In fact, you speak English probably better than some of us for sure. All right, sir. Well, thank you for the time, and I appreciate it. And we'll do the community podcast again in a couple weeks.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Andy. See you soon then.
Thank you.